Hey guys, OG Albina here, bringing you guys SPL Draft Notes Week 5, the show about everything and anything SPL related. If you guys do enjoy this episode of SPL Draft Notes, I'd really appreciate if you dropped a like on the video, as well as subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 5,000 subs by the end of the year. And if you hit that sub button today, we'll get that much closer, and I would really appreciate it a ton. It makes a ton of a difference to a small creator like myself. And yeah, with that being said, before we jump into last week's games and kind of how those went, I do want to mention this week, unfortunately, we do not have an interview, just because of the fact that I had a very busy week and I wasn't able to link up with any of the coaches. Hopefully next week I'll have one scared away for you guys. I apologize. What we'll do instead to supplement that is we'll go over some cool sets that I saw in the week prior, and we'll show some footage of those on screen in case you missed it. Now, with that being said, let's jump into last week's recap. First up, we have CBAD versus Shuckleking in a 5-0 victory for CBAD. A really cool set, honestly. We'll talk about it more in a little bit, but Gouging Fire really popping off, sweeping Shuckle and putting in a ton of work. Next up, we have Uzi versus Playmore. Uzi picking up some big kills with Iron Shards and honestly playing really well overall with a lot of his pivots, and things like Rotom also completely popping off and catching, you know, General Tar Heel or Ben off guard for Playmore, putting himself in a good position and able to take home a nice 2-0 victory. Next up, we had Haydunn versus Shady, a game I was personally very excited for. Two OGs who have been around for such a long time come back to the format, getting to square off against each other, and Shady was able to take home a nice 2-0 victory on the back of Grimmsnarl being incredible offensively in the game. I know it served as kind of a parting shot pivot in general, but it was putting in a lot of work offensively and doing a ton of damage. So really happy to see that guy do something besides screens and get out, right? It was really cool to see. So big win for Shady. Good stuff. Then we have Leo versus Drewby. Drewby brought the heat this week, but unfortunately Leo was able to take home the victory, honestly due to a pretty big team effort, but Ogrepon, Hearthflame, and Uxie grabbing the most kills and getting 2 each, everything else getting 1 if they did pick one up. Leo picking up a nice and convincing 5-0. Then we have Chimpact versus Emvee, a game that a ton of people were excited for, myself included. Really star-studded matchup for two great coaches who are having a great season thus far. But Chimpact able to take home a very convincing win off of the back of Drifblim once again. I remember before the season I said, man, he got Tera Revrum, that guy's broken. I mean, he's making Drifblim look broken and Revrum look like a bum. A burger flipper, if you will. So, big win for Chimpact. He's able to keep the win and ways going. Then we have Joey in his Los Angeles Lakers versus Gator in his Florida Gators. Gator able to take home a narrow 2-0 victory. Some misplays, unfortunately, in the end, some missteps, but it was very tight, and even when there was misplays, it was more so heat of the moment things and not necessarily blatant bad play. So it was a really fun game to watch. On Gator's side, Hisui Samurott went absolutely crazy, and he's able to pick home a nice 2-0 victory. And then lastly, we have KyleAye versus Nexus. Again, Kyle brought the heat, man. The Black Sludge Houndstone was something. It sure had Nexus shaking in his boots, but he was able to pull out a nice 2-0 victory and get some more winning ways going. I think that's 2 in a row for Big Nexus, which is awesome. Now, as for our pick'ems, where you see we are 16-5. We have about a 75-ish% win, or pick'ems rate correctly and things like that, so that's obviously really cool. Happy with that for sure. And yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump on into some cool highlights. First up, of course, I said it in the last section of the video, but that CBAD set was really cool. I mentioned last week that I thought Shuckle really wanted to control the game with his weather, and Shuckle did take that approach, but a really cool Sunny Day Gouging Fire set is going to allow Chase to not only reset the weather on his own end without having to send in something like a Ninetales, but also kind of flip those weather matchups on their head. With that crazy bulk it has, it basically becomes a water resist in the sun and takes on really all of those offensive rain threats and takes them on really well, allowing him to set up Dragon Dance after Dragon Dance after Dragon Dance, Morning Sun up a ton of HP, and just heat crashed the squad. I thought that set was really cool and really innovative from Chase's end. I was definitely very impressed. Obviously, we have to shout out Drifblim, picking up 4 in the game versus Emvee. Like I said, again, in the last section of the video, I've always talked about how Revrum, I think, is probably too broken for a format like this with Tera. But again, Drifblim just putting in a ridiculous amount of work in this game, picking up 4 kills and taking Emvee to his first loss on the season, which was really cool. And then finally, I want to shout out Shady's Grimmsnarl. Again, picking up 3 KOs is pretty darn impressive on a Pokemon that's typically relegated to screens, Thunder Waving, and Parting Shot 85 to 90% of the time. It definitely put in a ton of work and was the one that was able to bring him back into this game and secure a nice and narrow 2-0 victory, or yeah, 2-0 victory? 2-0 victory against Haydunn. So definitely some really cool brings and, sets from the coaches this week. And in particular, that Gouging Fire was really cool, man. But yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our first matchup. First up, we have Shady, who's trying to get a little bit of a winning streak going versus Emvee and his Denver Nuggets, trying to bounce back after getting their first loss of the season. Now, as for Shady, I think Haydunn looks insanely strong. Its dual stabs plus Thunderbolt really do hit this team incredibly, incredibly hard, depending on whether or not you want to go on a Spec set, a Scarf set, an Assault Vest set, some kind of Resist Berry. Really, the options are unlimited, and this thing can really put on a lot of pressure on Emvee's team. I think offensively, Lando is also really strong into this squad, and a cool option that you can go for since you are fast in the Annihilate, but if you're worried about Mirror Urbaning it, or intimidating it, sorry, I just spoiled it, you can always rock out with the Mirror Herb, giving yourself a +2 in attack, and super threatening that Annihilate that's going to try and check you, potentially. So I really, or at least take advantage of your Intimidate, at the very least, and force you out. So definitely a really, really cool option here. I think Zoroark is a really, really good ape deterrent in the sense that it really makes it struggle with its moveset, because it has to fit on dark coverage in order to hit it, or some kind of coverage in general at the very least, because you are going to be immune to both its stabs, something that is only, something that Zorua and Zoroark can boast, which is really cool. And then I also think that if Ape is dealt with, or at least chipped down, if some kind of SD Sneasler goes crazy, really you just need dual stabs plus Shadow Claw, and you're going to go to town against a team like this. You find that SD opportunity, Ape is a little bit chipped, maybe use your Lando to do so, and then from there, we're just going to go ahead and hopefully clean through with some kind of SD unburden set. So I think that's probably Shady's best mode of attack. Sweeping the Sneasler team, or logo, with the Sneasler would be pretty cool too. Now, as for Emvee set, I think that Annihilate is pretty strong. Bulk Up is hard to fit because I feel like you really want rest, but you could also go Bulk Up 3 attacks, you go some kind of AV set, some kind of Scarf variant also isn't terrible. But I do definitely think it has pretty bad Moveset syndrome in this game. I think Raging Bolt is insanely strong in this game. Draco is ridiculously free in this matchup. When your Fairy is going to be something like Grimmsnarl, as much as I hyped it up before, it's not going to want to come in and take Volt Switches and Thunderbolts, and that means that Draco, again, is super free. Whether it be on a Specs variant or some set that can switch up its moves, kind of just depends. I think DD Mew is a great endgame win con. You do need to chip down some things like the Rotom, like the Chaladon, and you need to determine Scarfers. Scar Zoroark definitely makes a lot of sense here, but if you can deal with that, or find an opportunity to get 2 of those DDs, you're going to be in a good spot. And Polygon is also a solid, especially defensive pivot into Archaladon and Azelf, maybe Wakan for their Thunderbolts, or some kind of Citrus variant so you could take one hit, get out of range of the next, and kind of adjust accordingly. And then I also think that Flygon also has really solid wheel potential. Maybe some kind of clear amulet set to really stuff landers, and set up a DD and go to town from there, but yeah. Now, overall, I am going to lead Shady in this matchup. I think, again, Emvee has a little bit more general options into this matchup, but I think that Shady's top-end threats, things like Sneasler, Landorus, Archaladon, Zoroark, are all so unbelievably strong in Emvee's team. It's going to be very hard for them to deal with them over the course of the game, so we are going to lead Shady. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Breakers and Pokeaimmd versus the New York Marauders and Drewby. Now, from Joey's side, I love Cinderace here. Checks do not switch in long term and are super, super exploitable. Mons like Sandaconda, even Mons like Weezing that can come in and take a hit and, threaten it out potentially. They don't have great reliable recovery, and they're not the best Pokemon in the matchup overall, especially on a big U-turn. Pyro Ball and Zen Headbutt just absolutely smokes in this game. Pyro Zen hits pretty much the majority of the team very, very hard and looks very, very strong. Sucker is also a great option. I think that Latias can also be really strong offensively and defensively. I think Calm Mind is super solid when Skuntank goes down, and Scarf absolutely smokes offensively and kind of just lets Draco the whole game. And that's the real downside of having something like Weezing as your Fairy in these Lottie matchups. It really does make it pretty tough. Scizor functions as a solid pivot and revenge killer. Bullet Punch is always going to be a nice thing into the likes of Iron Boulder, and it's a great pivot into the likes of Rillaboom and Hydrapple, which is really, really solid. I think Quill is also a great pivot with Intimidate and things like that, but it also sets up Spikes. I think Spikes pressure, plus a lot of the strong offense like Cinderace, Lycanroc, Latias is going to be very important for Joey. I think Arbiter definitely looks really, really strong. I'd probably go Fairy in this matchup. Maybe you can force some extra damage on Skuntank, which would be really nice for the Latias. Now, on Drewby's side, I really, really like Boulder offensively. The only issue is I don't think it's a great setup sweep in this game. With all of the anti-cheese priority that Joey has on the team in Basculin, Scizor, Lycanroc, Cinderace, it really does struggle to kind of SD booster and sweep through your team. So I think that a choice band variant is really, really strong here. I think if you Swampert with One Zen Headbutt or Close Combat, it's going to really struggle switching in to Banded Mighty Cleaves. And beyond that Swampert, there is no rock resist on this team, really. It absolutely smokes through a ton of these mods, and I definitely think it's very, very strong here. I think Quacklevault is probably your best win con in the end game. Some kind of SD variant, whether it be with Resist Berry, some kind of boosting item, whatever it may be, really does do well if you can get the ball rolling, kind of get that Aqua Step going, maybe get a Moxie boost here or there, and go to work. So definitely a really, really strong Pokemon here in my opinion. I think Sandaconda is solid as an ace and Lycan check. You can always go rest and get that Shed Scan and get that back. I think Rocky Helmet's probably your best bet. Also decently solid Terramon in the matchup. I think Skuntank is probably the exact opposite in the sense that it is your specially defensive pivot into the likes of Latias, and even Pokemon like Thundurus and DNC and things like that. You can at least pivot in, kind of adjust accordingly, and do things such as so. Then lastly, I think Infernape can also whittle down Quack checks. I really like Scarf in this game. I think the speed tier is really, really nice. And if the check is going to be something like Swampert, that's really going to help out, what do you call it? The Boulder, and if the pivot is going to be Latias, it's really going to help out the Quacklevault and your other fighting type. Now, overall, I am going to go Joey over Drewby in this game just because I think the priority offense, plus guys like Latias, is just really, really strong in this matchup, but there's definitely angles for Drewby to approach this from. Next up, we have KyleAye and his Miami Dawn fans versus Playmore Esports and Playmore Esports. I was told that that's their team name, so I remember it now, I think. I'm really, really upset if I forgot. I can't. But from Kyle's side, I think that there's no ground resist from Playmore. So that means Excadrill comes in and it clicks Earthquake. I understand there's a flying immune or a ground immunity in Iron Jugulis, but that does not switch into Excadrill. I think a Choice Band variant or even just a Life Orb 4 attacks variant is so insanely strong in this game and really, really puts on a ridiculous amount of pressure on Playmore's team. Though, obviously, if we have Drill and we want to go crazy, we're going to need Tar so we can set up the sand, but that's okay because Tar is also ridiculously strong. There's no dark resist on Playmore's side that's not Valiant, so there's really not great dark, and I guess Jugu, who you wall to the ends of the earth, so really there's not great switch-ins to this guy. I think a Choice Band variant is valid. I think that a Resist Berry is also okay, but I also really like Smooth Rock. Just a Smooth Rock offensive set can really put in a ton of work. Maybe an EV for certain hits that you need to live, and you kind of use it as a pivot, but if you get in on Pokemon like Vaporeon and Amoonguss, you hit him with a big knockoff, that plus sand and rocks, Drill is going to absolutely go crazy. So I love the Sand Core this week. I also think that if you chip Metagross and Glass Trainer, Lottie can super win with a late game agility set. Really, really breaking through this squad super, super well. The combination of just Psychic Dragon really hits everything that's not named Metagross, and potentially a Tera Fairy Glacier, which obviously gets hit by Psychic moves, but not super, super hard. So if you can whittle those guys, you're going to be in a great spot. Your fourth move, on top of agility and stabs, can either be Thunderbolt or Shadow Ball, depending on if you're more worried about Jugulis or Metagross. Now, I also think that the combination of webs from your Vikavolt and Houndstone also do great. A more defensive Houndstone in particular is pretty solid. It's going to be great physically, defensively into the likes of a Garchomp. It's also going to catch something like Ceruledge very off guard, really, really off guard if it tries to get a Ghost move into you. And then even Valiant soft checking physical variants of that, which I definitely think a physical variant is probably coming in this game. I also think Moltres is really solid defensively and checks a ton, whether it be Valiant, whether it be the Bitter Blading guy, Ceruledge, whether it be guys like Metagross really well, things like that, unless the Rock Slide. So I really do think that Kyle has some great tools this week. So does Playmore, though, and Valiant goes crazy. I think some kind of special set makes the most sense. You could be Specs, but it's kind of hard to lock moves, so it really depends. I think Specs is valid because it's going to let you break through the likes of Clef easier. It's going to let you blow up the Tentacle with a 2-hit KO on Thunderbolt otherwise. Thunderbolt's obviously going to be nice for the Moltres as well, but really you just need Stabs, Thunderbolt, Vacuum Wave, and you're going to be a great, great asset into this Sand matchup. I think Garchomp also looks incredibly strong. It puts a lot of pressure on Clef on top of Valiant, so I think the combination of those guys breaking is going to be great. Tera Glacier looks solid, as it always does, but really in that kind of ridiculously tanky role. Some kind of Tera Fairy set does wonders in this matchup into T-Tar and Latios, two of the bigger threats on your on the opposing side. I think Amoonguss can kind of play Disruptor and throw off Spores and be a big nuisance. It also checks Ogerpon really well, and it can check things like Drill. If it's not like boosting item, it won't get too KO'd. I think offensive SD Cerulean also has a big merits here with SD and then Bitterblade and then either Shadow Sneak or Poltergeist. Both look pretty darn strong. Overall, though, I am going to lean Kyle's side. I think just the Drill matchup is absolutely insane. I think he's going to be able to get a big bounce back win this week and get back into the winning column. Next up, we have Nexus versus Leo in a really exciting matchup. Now, from Nexus' side, I think that the combination of Kyurem and Enamorus look really strong offensively. Now, why do I mention them both together? That's because there is a good check to both of them in Tinkaton, especially defensive Tinkaton. Something with the Shuckleberry is going to check both of those guys as well, but it is very stretched thin and having to check both of those guys. And because that's the case, if one of them catches it with an Earth Power, or we use one to whittle down and break down the Tinkaton, the other one is going to go to town and have a very fun time in this matchup. So I really like that combination of offense. Speaking of offense, I think the Ursaluna looks insane. Outside of the top 3 Pokemon, there's nothing on this team that OHKOs Ursaluna. And that means some kind of Playmore variant can kind of come in on, momentum from the rest of the team and free switches and just click Facade or Headlong Rush and kill something. Literally every time. And it really does put Leo's team really far on the back foot if that thing does find the position to get off a ton of damage. I think that Smash Blastoise is also very solid in this game. If the likes of Manaphy and Appleton are chipped down, you get off that Smash and you can really put on a ton of pressure. So I really like that one. And I think that T-Flame is really solid and really important in this game. I think some kind of special set with Gale Wings is going to be great in Revenging Tusk, Revenging Weakened Bundle, Revenging the Ogerpon after it trailblazes and is about to smoke through your team. We'll talk about that in a second. But I really don't like physical because Zapdos is there, and also we don't want to lose our Gale Wings. We want to be Boots and come in, switch in, click Hurricane a couple times, and put on a lot of pressure on Leo's team potentially. Now, speaking of Leo's team, I think that Tusk is really strong here offensively. If you look at its stats and the damage it does to Nexus' team, it's insane. It just has bad speed tier here. So I think a potential option for that guy is going to be a Scarf variant. It really does revenge a lot of Leo's or Nexus' team when they are not Scarfed, which is really solid. So I would probably go Scarf Tusk here. I think that Bundle also rocks Nexus as well. I mean, especially defensive Jirachi is probably the only option, but that thing gets flip turned on, and then Scarf Tusk comes in, and then Ogerpon comes in, and we're in for a bad time. Speaking of which, Ogerpon comes in. That guy is ridiculously scary. I think a Trailblaze dual stab set with Rock Tomb Tech for the Talonflame, and it just can kind of win after getting up one Trailblaze. It is insane how strong that Pokemon is in this matchup here. It is ridiculously good here. I think that Overcoat and Tinkaton form a great defensive core, and they both stack a million hazards, whether it be Tinkset and a Brox or Quill getting a ton of free spiking opportunities. It's really going to help out the likes of Bundle and Tusk to break through for your Trailblazing Ogerpon to just kind of pick up a dub. I also like Tinkaton because it could potentially force in Talonflame. It gets a knockoff on that guy, and he's basically useless at that point. So really solid Pokemon. And I also think that Appleton can be a solid threat here. And it kind of helps relieve a lot of the pressure that Tinkaton has on it if we are Tera stealing the Appleton to kind of have it check either Enam or Kyurem. Overall in this matchup, I am going to go Leo. I think his top 3 is insane offensively. He has great pivots in Quill plus Tinkaton, and then last one can be something like Appleton, Zapdos, or Uxie as a solid pivot here. So I'm going to lean Leo here, but definitely go either way. Now we have Gator versus CBAD. Really fun one here. We have Goldango from Gator that I think does really good offensively. Really exploits the likes of something like a Corviknight trying to defog away these hazards set up by the hazard stack offense from Gator's end and the Hisui Samurott, which is really great. Speaking of Hammerot, it absolutely smacks in this game. Not in the sense that it OHKOs everything, but it gets off pretty free spikes in a lot of matchups and forces in the Primarina. Primarina has to come in and take potentially prior spikes damage as well as take a ceaseless edge. That's not going to tickle. It's going to do damage over time. If we do damage over time, something like Keldeo can come in and put on even more pressure in this game, which I really like that aspect of it. It's not great fighting resist from that Keldeo side after Prim goes down and it's like Mesprit takes a Hydro Pump outside of that Sun. Now, I also think that Moth loves the Sun and smokes an endgame booster when you know, some things are decently chipped down and whittled. If it can find that opportunity, especially if Sun is up and it's faster than everything in the matchup potentially, oh my goodness, it is going to go absolutely insane. I think it's a really, really strong mod here. I think Terrifier Whimsicott also has potential offensively, really breaking through a lot of this team, to be completely honest, with a more offensive variant. And I think that Moonblast, Grass move, and then Tera Blast Fire just kind of hits the entire team very hard and puts on a lot of pressure, which is really solid. Then lastly, I think Raptor absolutely smokes. Outside of Corviknight, it kind of 2-hit kills Urka's the whole squad, and it gets really free U-turns on-site Corviknight into a lot of our other threats, like Goldango, like Iron Moth, like Keldeo if it is chipped out sufficiently. So I definitely like that guy here. Now, as for CBAD, gouging has no answer, as per usual. I think that DD is solid, but you do have to break a little bit first in order to win with it. Things like Donphan need to be whittled. Things like Keldeo need to be whittled to just die at +1, but if you do find the opportunity to whittle things down, gouging is going to be great here. I think Wake is also an insane mon overall. Maybe some Belly Bolts and Daduns can check it, but realistically, you kind of just come in and click Water Move. I understand there's dual waters in the on the other side in the Hammerot and the Keldeo, but if you get it for free on something else, you can kind of just click that Hydro Steam, and honestly, once Whimsicott comes in and takes 1, it's going to be really hard for it to ever switch it again, and then we can go ahead and click Draco the entire game. There really isn't a great answer to Draco Meteors and Dragon Pulses from Walking Wake. I think Tera Swifter can also just absolutely smoke through this game with a bunch of different typings. I think Dark is probably your best bet, but there's definitely multiple options. I think that Prim is solid defensively, and this fact that it checks both waters, but again, you guys be careful that they don't get overloaded, or Prim doesn't get overloaded from checking both of them. And then Sun offense is just going to be really strong here. You could also fit in guys like Venu, but I think you need to fit on Ninetales in some way and just absolutely blitz through Gator. And if CBAD can do that properly and correctly, I think he pulls out this win this week. I am definitely leaning CBAD here, but Gator's obviously been playing ridiculously well, so who knows how it ends up going. Alrighty, gang, only 2 more, and for this one we have Haydunn versus Uzi. Now, for Haydunn, I think Darkrai is, again, really solid here. I think some kind of Scarf variant could be really solid as a great revenge killer like Pult and Chi-Yu if we're kicking Focus Blast, or you could just be a 4-attacks like E-Belt variant, or just a 4-attacks set in general. Really does well here and has great coverage overall. It's a little hard to lock, so maybe you go with that, but really there's a combination of Dark Pulse, Focus Blast, and Psychic for the Okie dokie, and then either Thunderbolt or Sludge Bomb as your last move. Really does do wonders in this matchup and is really, really strong here. I think that Spadef Sylveon helps a ton with both Drag Bolt. It's one of the best Drag Bolt checks in the game, but it also checks non-choice Specs Chi-Yu variants. Now, Specs is going to blow you up, but you can at least figure that out, and there's a lot of things on your team that can, or there's a couple things in your team that can potentially revenge it, but not a ton at the very least. I think this is another SD Gliscor matchup. There definitely is a chance for that thing to absolutely go crazy and really bully down a lot of the fat that Uzi's team has, so if you can find that opportunity, going to be in a good spot. And then the AV Hisui can also be great and be a really solid 1-for-1 trade machine, which can be really valuable in a matchup like this where the rest of your team doesn't have a great matchup overall. Guaranteed trading 1-for-1 is going to allow you to kind of, split your checks up a little less thinly and put yourself in a pretty good spot. I think that Specs Chi-Yu looks unguardable, unfortunately, is the only issue. Really, the only Pokemon that are faster than Chi-Yu are Darkrai, which has to hit a Focus Blast to kill it, Jolteon, which does not kill it, and then the Serperior, which doesn't really do much to it. Other than that, the entire team is outpaced by Chi-Yu, and will all just die to fire moves. Gyarados doesn't take them. You can kind of just come in, click Overheat, and something's gonna die. There's not really much that can stop it. I think this is a great Hex Pult matchup in the sense that you can Will-O-Wisp with things like Sylveon coming in, but also Hex is going to be really strong into the likes of Gliscor, being poisoned with that Toxic Orb. It's going to make it a little bit tougher to break through Glowking naturally, but it's not like Glowking necessarily smokes you initially, so you can Wisp it and then Hex throughout the rest of the game, put yourself in a good spot. Hex plus Draco looks really, really strong overall, is the main thing. I think Azu also looks really strong. Maybe an Assault Vest variant just to kind of soft check things like Darkrai a little bit better. Or even a Choice Band variant can really put in a lot of work here. So, really strong Pokemon. I also love Okidogi offensively. The combination of Stabs plus like Knockoff and Ice Punch can definitely put on a lot of pressure for some, pretty favorable knocks onto a few members like the Glowking. Potentially 1v1 Gliscor since it'll pretty much always live in Earthquake and then just Ice Punch and kill it back or outspeed slower variants, so that's really cool. Yeah, just really strong overall. Great mod here. And then lastly, I also really like Treads. I think it's also ridiculously strong offensively. The combination of its stabs plus Ice Spinner is always going to be solid, but in this game in particular, it's great. Really, there's only Gyarados that can take that on, which isn't the best Pokemon in the world, to be completely honest. So I definitely really like Treads in this matchup. Overall, I am going to go Uzi over Haydunn. I think that just Chiyu is probably one of the best Chiyu matchups I've ever seen in my life, and it's going to probably put in a ridiculous amount of work here if I had to guess. And now, lastly, we have Shuckleking versus Chimpact here. Now, from Shuckle, I think that Gren endgame with Battle Bond is very, very possible here. You do need to chip down things like potential AV Iron Hands, things like Screen Tail, things like Ogerpon. When those guys are whittled down into range, I think that Gren can absolutely smoke through a team like this. I think that Banded Excalibur is also really, really strong. There's not ice resist in this team. I think we've talked about this before. The steel type is Reverum, which isn't really an ice resist. I think you can come in and you can kind of click Icicle Crash for free. Banded Ice Shard is always going to be nice into things like the Dragonite, things like the Torn, things like even the Ogerpon is going to take a lot of damage from it. Things like the Drifblim, if it's Unburdened popped and things like that. So I really do like Banded Backs a lot here. I think that Glimmer is also a hazards machine in this game. It just gets up spike after spike after spike and really, really whittles down a team like this. There isn't, really any removal options to stop it. So I think that the Glimmer is probably going to go crazy. And then I think that Ludi also has an angle here. Potentially Rain is an option. It can potentially really, really threaten and whittle down, Chimpact's team. And the only issue is we're giving Ogerpon Rain if that's the case. And that guy's a little scary for Shuckle, but, it's a risk you might be willing to take. And then Hatterene can also deter hazards from Tinglu, which is great. It can deter hazards, run an E button set to where if it gets attacked, and get down to a big breaker, something like Grand in the end game, something like Bax, or something like Ursaluna Blood Moon, which can also smoke in any given matchup, obviously, but this one's no different, right? Definitely really, really solid. Now, from Chimpact's side, I think that Hands is absolutely insane here. It's always good, but some kind of AV Hands, maybe a little bit speedier to make sure we outspeed most of Ursaluna variants, and we're going to be in a really good spot. It checks Bax, it checks Grant, it checks Moon offensively, it checks Glim, it checks Hat. I mean, the list goes absolutely on and on. It checks Ludi. It even checks Kilowattrel. Like, it really does incredibly well. And can kind of 1v1 the entirety of Shuckle's team. Definitely looks really strong here. I think the Arcanine is the same offensively. There's nothing switches into dual stabs. I mean, the Rain Setter is going to die to a Head Smash. All the water types are going to die to a Head Smash. Everything else is going to die to a Flarelets or a Head Smash as well. Definitely a ridiculously strong Pokemon. You kind of need Rain Up, and then going into things like Bronzong slash... yeah, that's it. Bronzong, because it's going to resist rock afterwards, and there's not really anything else that does that on a team like this. I think that Ogre under Rain, if he does go the Rain route, I think I have in my notes, Ogre under Rain, sheesh. That is how I feel exactly. I think that Ogerpon can be really strong here. I think that Screen Tail is a really good deterrent to a ton of the members on Shuckle's team. Encore is going to punish fatter Ursaluna variants from clicking buttons they aren't supposed to click. I think it's going to punish things like DD Bax. It's going to be annoying for Gran. It's going to be annoying for Bax. Really does a ton of work in this game overall. And then I think Reverum to avoid T-Spike from Shuckle's team, as well as setting them up with a parting shot in the back, is really, really solid. If we can parting shot around, get up hazards, get in free switch-ins into the likes of Hands and Arcanine, I think that we have potential to win this game. However, overall, I am going to go Shuckleking over Chimpact. I think that mons like Grand Bax, Blood Moon, and even Glimmer setting up hazards are going to be really overwhelming for Chimp's more balance-oriented team. He definitely has a chance to pull it off, but we are going to go Shuckle here. That is going to be the end of Draft Notes Week 5. Again, I know a little bit shorter of an episode this week. It's mostly due to the fact that I unfortunately could not get an interview going. That's my fault. I definitely meant to do so. Just was very busy with classes and work. Next week, I'm hoping to get one. I'm going to ask someone this weekend, start getting that scheduled out for you guys. If you guys have anybody in particular that you would like to see an interview this week, or this upcoming week, please let me know down in the comments below. I don't read minds. If you guys want to see someone, let me know. I'll reach out to them, see if I can make it happen. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Sub if you're new. See you guys next time. Later.